In the late 20th and early 21st century, identity politics became prominent, influenced by globalization, social media, postmodernism and intersectionality, and political economy. The interconnectedness of the world through mass communication and migration led to both awareness of diverse identities and destruction of some of the Western traditions and ideologies. As global mass communication technologies like internet, social media, satellite TV enable the rapid dissemination of ideas and information, previously marginalized cultures, identities, and issues have gained visibility on a global stage. Platforms like X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok allow individuals to share their personal opinions to engage in political organizations on a global scale. Global movements such as Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and LGBTQ are examples of how identity politics, fueled by social media, transcends national boundaries, creating global solidarity and global tragedy movements, promoting the idea that we should prioritize our differences, be it race, gender, religion, or sexual orientation over shared national identity. History and values has proved cons more than pros. The essence of a nation lies in its ability to unite people under a common set of beliefs and a shared culture. But identity politics pushes people to view themselves first and foremost through the lens of their identity group, whether it's ethnic, gender-based, or any other classification. Balkanization is another form of parasite that identity politics has given to us. Balkanization is where various groups fight for their own interests rather than working together for the good of the country as a whole. Instead of unified nation, we have factions that compete for power, resources, and recognition. This is not how a cohesive, strong country is built. A nation must be united, not divided along racial or ethnic lines. We have seen a rising trend of removal of statues of historical figures such as those involved in the founding of the nation. Identity politics pushes the narrative that these figures are inherently evil or racist, undermining the country's history and heritage. Following the 2015 Charleston church shooting and the subsequent national conversation about racism, many cities began to reconsider the presence of Confederate statues. A notable example is the removal of the statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017. This decision sparked violent protests, including the infamous Unite the Right rally, which highlighted deep divisions over race and heritage in the United States of America. In 2020, during widespread protests against racial injustice following the murder of George Floyd, numerous statues were removed or toppled across the United States and beyond. Statues of figures such as Christopher Columbus and Ulysses S. Grant were targeted due to their association with colonialism and racism. For instance, a statue of Columbus was pulled down in Boston while another was beheaded in Richmond Hill, Virginia. In the UK, the statue of Edward Colston, a slave trader, was pulled down by protesters in Bristol during Black Lives Matter demonstration in June 2020. The event sparked a national debate about historical figures linked to the slavery and colonialism and led to discussion about other monuments across the country. Many universities have faced pressure to remove statues or rename buildings associated with controversial historical figures. For example, Princeton University announced in 2016 that it will remove a plaque honoring former President Woodrow Wilson due to his racist policies and views. This decision was part of a broader movement to reassess the legacy of historical figures within academic institutions. This creates a sense of shame about the country's past instead of encouraging pride in the progress made. National identity is not just about diversity, but about pride in a shared heritage. When you erase or vilify this heritage, you weaken the cohesion and pride that bind the nation together. Another big problem is that now we have a situation where policies and decisions are often based on group identity rather than individual merit. The focus is shifted from individual capabilities, hard work, and talent to what category someone falls into, be it based on race, gender, sexual orientation, or any other identity group. This encourages policies like affirmative action, which prioritize giving benefit to a certain groups, regardless of whether they are the most qualified or deserving. A notable case is Students for Fair Admission v. Harvard University, where the organization accused Harvard of discriminating against Asian American applicants by holding them to higher standards. In 2020, California voters rejected Proposition 16, which aimed to reinstate affirmative action in public employment, education, and contracting. Proponents argued that it was necessary to address systematic inequalities, while opponents contended that it would prioritize group identity over individual qualifications and merit. The defeat of the proposition reflected a significant public concern about the implication of identity-based policies. Many corporations have implemented diversity hiring initiatives aimed at increasing representation of underrepresented groups. For example, companies like Google and Facebook have publicly committed to increasing diversity within their workforce. Critics argue that these initiatives can lead to hiring practices that prioritize demographic characteristics over qualifications, potentially compromising meritocracy in favor of meeting diversity quotas. The UK's Equality Act 2010 requires public bodies to consider how their decisions affect people with protected characteristics like race and gender. This has led to instances where funding and resources are allocated based on group identity rather than individual need or merit. Critics argue that this can create a system where individuals from certain groups receive preferential treatment regardless of their personal circumstances. In sports, diversity quotas have been implemented in various leagues and organizations to ensure representation among players and coaches. For instance, the National Football League, or NFL, has introduced a Rooney Rule, which requires teams to interview minority candidates for head coaching positions. While aimed at the increasing diversity, such rules may lead to hiring decisions based on race other than coaching qualifications. Most of these policies promote and reverse discrimination too, where those who may not belong to historically marginalized groups are penalized or overlooked, even if they are more qualified. This leads to a sense of resentment and division as people begin to feel that their hard work and abilities don't matter if they don't belong to a favored identity group. The notion that people should be rewarded based on their identity, not their individual contributions, ultimately harms society as a whole by undermining the principle of equal treatment. According to an article, Harvard's affirmative action policy goes on trial, published in NPR. Asian American applicants alleged that Harvard University discriminated against them in the admission process. The plaintiffs argued that despite having higher academic qualifications compared to their peers, they were held to stricter standards due to their race. This case highlights concerns about how affirmative action policies can lead to perceptions of reverse discrimination where individuals feel their hard work and achievements are undervalued. Passed in 1996, California's Proposition 209 banned affirmative action in public employment, education, and contracting. Supporters of the proposition argued that it was necessary to prevent reverse discrimination against non-minority individuals who felt they were being unfairly disadvantaged in favor of less qualified candidates from underrepresented groups. The proposition reflects ongoing debates about the balance between promoting diversity and ensuring equal treatment for all individuals. In recent years, the University of California system has faced criticism for its admissions policies, which some argue prioritize underrepresented minorities at the expense of academically qualified applicants. For instance, a report by California Association of Scholars indicated that while minority enrollment increased, many high-achieving students felt marginalized and overlooked due to their race or ethnicity. The idea that certain groups are perpetually oppressed and need special protection or compensation creates a victimhood culture, where individuals within certain groups are encouraged to see themselves as victims of systematic oppression, regardless of their personal circumstances. The result is a society where people constantly demand special treatment based on perceived victimhood rather than striving for self-reliance and personal responsibility, which are key tenets of strong and prosperous society. Instead of encouraging people to work hard, overcome obstacles, and contribute to society, identity politics encourages them to focus on their victim status and demand compensation or preferential treatment. This creates division, resentment, and dependence on the state rather than fostering independence and unity. In many universities, the establishment of safe spaces and the use of trigger warnings have been promoted as ways to protect students from potentially harmful content. This approach encourages a victim mentality by suggesting that students are unable to engage with challenging ideas without special accommodations. This has led to a culture where individuals feel justified in avoiding discomfort rather than confronting it. On platforms like X and Facebook, individuals often mobilize around perceived injustices, leading to what some describe as cancel culture. This phenomena can encourage individuals to adopt a victim mentality, where they seek validation and support for their grievances while demanding accountability from others. Because of the cancel culture, people are increasingly afraid to speak their minds or express their opinions, even in private, or because of the fear of being canceled or socially ostracized. This self-censorship is especially damaging in a democracy where open debate and the exchange of ideas are essential for the functioning of political system. A survey conducted by Fire Survey in 2020 revealed that 60% of the college students felt unable to express their opinions during class discussion due to the fear of being ostracized. This environment of self-censorship undermines the educational experience, as students may refrain from sharing valuable insights or engaging in meaningful debates. Public figures frequently face intense scrutiny and potential backlash for expressing controversial opinions on social media. For instance, President Donald Trump faced widespread condemnation and calls for cancellation when he publicly criticized NFL players who protested during the national anthem, and he was banned from all of the major social media platforms like Facebook and now X, and formerly known as Twitter, back in the time when he was president during his first term. Research indicates that social media exacerbates a phenomenon known as the spiral of silence, where individuals suppress their views if they believe they differ from those around them. And this can lead to a distorted perception of public opinion, preventing open debate on critical issues and ultimately harming democratic processes. The Harry Potter author has been criticized for her comments on transgender issues, which many perceive as transphobic. This had led to the calls for cancellation of J.K. Rowling from various fans, communities, and discussions about separating her work from her personal views. Gina Carano was fired from Mandalorian after posting controversial statements on social media that many deemed offensive, including comparison to Holocaust victims. Her cancellation sparked debates about free speech and accountability in Hollywood. Thanks to Elon Musk, who, upon taking control, made sweeping changes to Twitter's content moderation policies, emphasizing free speech. He reinstated previously banned accounts, including that of former President Donald Trump, and announced an amnesty for suspended users. The battle between oppressor and oppression often pits one group against another, whether that's different racial groups, genders, or classes. The result? Racial animosity, gender conflicts, and a breakdown of civil discourse. When this type of ideology aligns with globalist ideologies, it seeks to undermine national sovereignty in favor of international institutions or a broader global community. Globalist forces frequently argue that borders are artificial and should be dismantled in favor of open immigration, multiculturalism, and international governance. This undermines national identity and sovereignty. National pride, which comes from respecting and celebrating shared cultures, history, and values, is seen as secondary to politics of division. A country's citizens should come first, and that the nation state should be sovereign with its laws and culture protected from external forces. Many forms of identity politics undermine traditional concepts of family and gender roles, promoting radical social changes that destabilize the family unit. Traditional family structures, often seen as the cornerstone of the stable society, are increasingly criticized and redefined through the lens of identity politics, which pushes for non-traditional family arrangements and questions the established notion of gender and parenthood. The promotion of gender fluidity and the push for gender-neutral policies in schools, workplaces, and legal systems often conflicts with the deeply held beliefs of many nationalists who see the traditional family and gender distinctions as foundational to the social order. For them, identity politics not only undermines traditional social structures but also challenges the moral and cultural values that define their nation. In America, influential figures such as Roger Severino from the Heritage Foundation have criticized initiatives aimed at inclusivity in military services and healthcare as manifestations of a radical agenda. This rhetoric has found traction in political campaigns and legislative efforts that seek to define gender strictly in the binary terms, reflecting a broader backlash against perceived threats to traditional societal norms. In Poland, a notable backlash against gender fluidity emerged when Catholic bishops launched a campaign against gender ideology in 2013. In Colombia, during the lead up to a referendum on a peace agreement that included provisions for the rights of LGBTQ individuals, conservative politicians framed these rights as an imposition of gender ideology. Former President Alvaro Uribe suggested that supporting the peace deal equated to rejecting traditional family values. Some of the Western traditionals and cultures are disappearing as a result of globalization. Cultures and norms from their countries and continents have successfully overshadowed the Western traditions and ideology over the course of past 2 decades. Most of the companies are engaging in the rainbow capitalism by using LGBTQ symbols or marketing to minorities without actually supporting the meaningful social or economic reforms that would benefit these groups. In this sense, identity politics can be commodified, reducing complex social structures to marketing tools. Many large retailers such as Target, Walmart, and Amazon prominently feature rainbow-themed merchandise during Pride Month. These are nothing but marketing tactics. Several corporations have been called out for engaging in rainbow washing, where they display support for LGBTQ just for the marketing purposes. During Pride Month, many companies changed their logos to include rainbow colors as the marketing techniques. AT&T has been criticized for its rainbow-themed marketing during Pride Month while simultaneously donating over $300,000 to anti-LGBTQ organizations and politicians. The same way, Amazon has also faced backlash for promoting LGBTQ pride while contributing nearly $90,000 to the organizations that oppose the LGBTQ. Additionally, the global race to bottom or cheap labor has exploited workers in the global south, particularly racial minorities, without providing meaningful opportunities for empowerment. This critique highlights how globalization's economic benefits often fail to reach marginalized communities even as identity-based movements gain global visibility. A multinational corporation might advertise its commitment to diversity by featuring a specific group or group members in its marketing campaigns, pretending to address systematic inequality or the economic disadvantages faced by those communities. This form of identity marketing can be seen as exploitative, using the appearance of inclusion to increase profits rather than fostering genuine social change. Similarly, cultural appropriations can be commodified in ways that disrespect the cultural significance of communities. For instance, fashion trends that borrow from tribal cultures might be sold to mainstream consumers without regard for the historical or cultural context of those symbols, reducing them to the aesthetic features for profit. We have seen a number of big box brands copying those trends and selling them for their own profits while not giving credit to their original creators. Both left and right-wing populist movements often frame their identity politics in opposition to global interconnectedness, emphasizing politically motivated identities rooted in the specific racial, cultural, or religious histories. These movements always threaten the social fabric of the countries. Jordan Peterson in 2016 publicly opposed Canada's Bill C-16. He argued that the bill would compel speech by forcing individuals to use preferred gender pronouns, claiming it infringed on free speech rights. This stance sparked significant media coverage and led to the protests both in support of and against him, positioning him as a leading figure in the culture wars. Following his opposition to Bill C-16, various protests erupted, including teach-ins organized by non-binary activists at the University of Toronto. Peterson faced intense scrutiny from students and faculty who accused him of promoting hate speech. His views led to a polarized environment on campus, with some students feeling threatened by his rhetoric. In June 2022, Peterson was suspended from Twitter, now X, after posting a tweet that, according to some, misgendered transgender actor Elliot Page, formerly known as Ellen Page, and referred to his physician as a criminal. The incident was deemed a violation of Twitter's hateful conduct policy. Peterson publicly refused to delete the tweet, stating he would rather die than do so, which further fueled his narrative of being a victim of cancel culture. Then in November 2022, the College of Psychologists of Ontario mandated Peterson to complete a remedial program regarding professionalism in public statements due to concerns about his public conduct. He contested this decision legally but ultimately lost his appeal, which further complicated his professional standing. Kimberly Crenshaw, an American civil rights advocate and professor at Columbia Law University, introduced the concept of intersectionality. She argued that the experience of Black women could not be fully understood by simply categorizing them as either Black or women, as the intersection of these identities create a distinct set of challenges. One of the central tenets of intersectionality is the focus on systematic oppression. The application of intersectionality often excuses individuals from taking personal responsibility for their actions. By farming people's challenges primarily in terms of their group identity, Crenshaw's framework can encourage a mentality of blame shifting. People may be more inclined to attribute their lack of success or personal struggles solely to systematic forces rather than considering their own decisions or efforts. In a society where intersectionality reigns, the definition of what is just becomes fragmented and subjective. Justice is no longer based on universal principles that apply to all citizens, but is tailored to the needs of specific identity groups. This can lead to a fragmented legal system where people are treated differently based on their identity, undermining the principle of equation protection under the law. Another debate over transgender athletes competing in women's sports has become a significant issue, where concerns about fairness and integrity of women's sports are often emphasized. Leah Thomas, a transgender woman and swimmer at the University of Pennsylvania, became a focal point in debate after winning the NCAA championship in the 500-yard freestyle in March 2022. Thomas' participation in women's event after competing on the men's team for 2 years undermines the achievements of the cisgender female athletes. In response to concerns about fairness in sports, several states have introduced or passed legislation aimed at banning transgender women from competing in biological women's sports. For example, states like Arkansas and South Dakota have enacted laws prohibiting transgender girls from participating in the female sports teams at schools. The opening ceremony of 2024 Paris Olympics, held on July 26, 2024, has also sparked significant controversy and backlash for several reasons. One of the most contentious moments was a tableau that parodied Leonardo da Vinci's iconic painting The Last Supper. The performance featured drag queens, a transgender model, and a semi-naked singer, Philippe Catherine, who emerged from a dinner plate surrounded by the fruits. Many viewers interpreted this as a disrespectful mockery of Christianity, particularly given the religious significance of the original artwork. The tableau drew condemnation from various religious authorities, including the Catholic Church in France. The Conference of French Bishops issued a statement expressing deep disapproval of what they viewed as a derision of Christian beliefs. Additionally, U.S. political figures, including House Speaker Mike Johnson and President Donald Trump, criticized the performance as disgraceful and offensive. The ceremony organizers were accused of promoting woke ideology and cultural insensitivity. Some commentators argued that the representation of LGBTQ+ themes overshadowed traditional values and respect for religious sentiments. Social media platforms were flooded with negative reactions from viewers who found the ceremony inappropriate and offensive. Many users described it as disgusting, calling for greater respect for religious beliefs during such a significant global event. The backlash highlighted how public sentiment can rapidly shift against perceived insensitivity in high-profile situations. Political elites have weaponized identity politics to keep us divided, to distract us from the real issues facing our nation, like economic instability, national security, and the erosion of the traditional values. They thrive on division because we fight amongst ourselves and we fail to see their failures. Instead of focusing on how we are different, we should return to the values that made this country great: individual liberty, personal responsibility, and the pursuit of happiness based on merit, not the color of one's skin or the identity they claim. Identity politics may be trendy, but it will never strengthen our country. The future of America lies in the collective effort to rise above the labels, to see each other not as members of separate groups, but as individuals. So let's reject division and embrace unity. Let's put a country before identity, and let's build an America that thrives on its shared values, not on its differences.